Good afternoon, everybody. I want to thank you all for coming this afternoon to help us think through the many ways in which we need to work together to approach this very serious problem of financial abuse and all of its many aspects associated with older people. The very rapidly growing population of seniors in the United States, and a couple of sentinel events that has led to actual legislative action. We now have a kind of official support for work in this arena that will do a couple of very important things. In addition to having an actual infrastructure to be thinking about these issues, we also have an opportunity for the infrastructure to be broad enough to assemble all of the elements from the government side to the private sector, who most frequently interacts with older people when it comes to financial matters, and to those of us in the nonprofit sector and advocacy sector who are interested in assuring that the best possible result of these combined elements is the result. And it seemed to me that it was an important thing for us at Benjamin Rose, to try to bring together not only people from Washington and other places who are part of that infrastructure, but also you here across the state of Ohio, people from Columbus and from the local community who are part of this, to work to have an exchange of ideas to try to get the conversation started. And I think it'll be a long and difficult one, but an important one that we have many elements that need to be a part of it. Let me move on to introducing our keynote speaker. You have a brief bio in the back of the program of Skip Humphrey, a former Attorney General himself for the state of Minnesota, a 10-year member of the Senate of the state of Minnesota, a longtime public servant, and now previously, apparently not right at this moment, but previously held two other positions that would be of interest to you. One is a board member of the AARP, which, for those of you in the aging services business, know there's really only a handful of people who wind up ever being on the board of AARP. And you learn a lot of stuff that is directly relevant to this. And also, he's a part-time professor at the University of Minnesota's School of Public Health. As the first occupant of his position, he obviously is learning things about Washington that he hadn't known before, but he's also just a tremendous advocate for the role that he's undertaking, and we're very, very happy and lucky to have him here in Cleveland. Skip Humphrey.
Well, thank you, Richard, and to all of you, and particularly to the Benjamin Rose Institute on Aging. I want to thank you for the opportunity to be back here in Ohio. What I'd like to do today, if it's at all possible, is to give you just a little bit of background about the Bureau that I work with, and to tell you kind of what some of our current priorities are. But I'd really like to have the feedback from all of you here about what you see happening in your workplace, on the street, what the concerns are, how the federal government might be a partner with you in this effort to combat this unfortunately growing, not only visibly growing, but growing problem of elder financial abuse and exploitation. So let me just kind of get at that. Now, you all know what the CFPB is, right? You've heard that. No, you haven't, probably not. If you went to acronym school, like I did in Washington, D.C., you would know that that's the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau. We are a young agency. We are actually 1 year old last Saturday. And the agency is a result, the Bureau is a result of the Dodd-Frank legislation that came out of the financial crisis of 2008, 2010. The Congress enacted that legislation, and the current director, appointed by the president, Mr. Richard Cordray, you've probably heard his name before, former Attorney General of Ohio, is our director. And with his appointment came some very significant new responsibilities and opportunities to regulate in the financial markets area. Obviously, out of that legislation, the Congress was trying to look forward to say, how can we not have this happen again? And so the mission of the CFPB, the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, is to ensure that American families have access to consumer financial markets that are fair, transparent, and competitive. And the way we're going to do that is to make sure that we adopt needed financial rules and that those rules are consistently and fairly enforced, and that we empower consumers to take control over their economic lives. Then the Congress also established the Office of Older Americans. The formal name is the Office for the Protection, the Office of Protection, Financial Protection for Older Americans. I just call it the Office of Older Americans, and if we're successful, it'll be the Office of Older, Smarter Americans. Now, the other thing I'd like to do, if it's at all possible, I want to step back just a little bit, because the way I look at this is the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau. So we have a lens that looks at financial transactions, not necessarily like the Federal Reserve that says, yes, we are concerned about consumers, but we also need to make sure that the whole institution and framework of banking is sound and safe within the country. This is an area in which we look specifically and directly from the consumer's standpoint. And actually, the Office of Older Americans is the only federal agency that is solely directed at looking at the financial protection of seniors and the efforts surrounding the decisions that seniors make with regard to financial decisions. So our mission with our bureau is to, number one, provide the kind of education, training, and counseling that will allow seniors to make sound financial decisions as they age. The other part of that is to make sure that they have the information and the tools to protect them from the scoundrels that are out there that would just as soon divert the money into their pockets. So you need to look at this from the perspective of the senior, of the elder person. And I know that you're in it every single day, so you understand perhaps better than the larger population does. But what we're talking about here is an individual who really understands what's at risk here. Their pension, if they have one, their savings, their home, their credit rating. You know, everything that they have worked for their entire life is there in front of them. And that's, in a sense, what is at risk when they go out into the marketplace and try to figure out what the decisions are that they need to take. The other thing that you need to understand is, a lot of people will say, well, why do they always focus? Why are those guys, those scoundrels, always focusing on seniors? And again, this is something you probably understand, but to put it on the large scale to see what's happening is rather astounding to me. It's where the money is, of course. And how much is that? Anywhere between $13 and $15 trillion is either under control or owned by people over 60 years of age in this country. That's a lot of money. No wonder they're out there trying to chase it. So we need to understand that is part of what will become the largest wealth transfer in the history of this nation from one generation to another, assuming we get it going the right way and the way that one generation wants it to go to the next generation. So there's a huge consequence of getting this right. And in addition to that, I think you have to understand, and you probably know even better than I, that when we don't get it right, when someone does get ripped off and completely ripped off, and there is no other means of support, it becomes all of our responsibility to help. And so this is not just a problem for seniors or seniors' families, it's all of our problem. And that's why we need to all come together to solve it. A recent study, the MetLife study, showed very clearly that in 2010, they reported back almost $3 billion stolen that was known of. And then there was another study out of New York that of those that are reported, only 1 in 40 cases are actually reported. So you just do the numbers of what we're talking about here as a very, very real financial problem for all of us. We've got to come to grips with that. The other part of this is that really shocks me is that a very significant part of that money that's going in the wrong direction, it's caused by people who are within the family. We also know the numbers, and you know the numbers, that some 22% of Americans over 70 have some form of mild cognitive impairment, which diminishes their ability to make financial decisions, and 1 in 8 Americans over 65 have some form of Alzheimer's disease. You know that as people age, they need help, and some need more help than others. I've read some scientific studies that show, and epidemiological studies that show that the first thing that kind of goes when you're getting a little older is dealing with financial transactions. Now, financial transactions 10 years ago was writing a check by and large. Oh, maybe going to the bank and getting a loan or something like that. Now you got to do it with digital stuff, everything all over the place. You got to understand what your credit rating is. The whole thing is becoming much more complex on a very, very rapid expanding basis. And that alone is a challenge for seniors. More and more people want to age in place. They want to live in their homes. They want to stay as independent as they possibly can. And in order to do that, they need help. They need help professionally. They need help from their family and others. And so it's, I think, our responsibility to make sure that not just the senior population is well aware of what needs to be done, but the next generation too. And to understand that that generation is taxed not only by those that are older than them that they need to take care of, but they got the young ones coming up at the same time. So it's a very significant challenge that they have to come to grips with. I hate to say it, guys, but on the average, the ladies here are going to live longer than us, if you take a look at the population. And what happens, unfortunately, in that situation, at least for the first part of the baby boomers, is they live all too often in isolation, and they live out, women live out beyond the means that were there to support them. So we're looking at all of these kinds of things. We're working with state attorneys general's offices, any number of people all across the country. Our massive staff of 5 is not going to be able to take care of 50 million people. I want you to know that. It just ain't going to happen, at least not under my guidance. But 5 talented, good people working with literally tens of thousands of passionate, intelligent, hardworking, very capable people, which you represent, we will solve this problem.